Father John, otherwise we will get started.
There he is.
Ah, very cool. Hey, Father John.
How are you? Hey. Oh, fairly well.
All right. Ready, Jay? Nice. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the Isla Vista Community Services District Board of Directors. I would like to announce that this meeting is being recorded, and I will now call the roll. I'm Director Brandt. I'm here. Director Geis.
Here.
Director Bertrand. Here. Director Freeman.
Here.
Director Hedges.
Here.
Director Nguyen.
Here.
And Director Thurlow could not be here today. With that, I would like to do the land acknowledgement. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the Chumash people, who are the traditional custodians of this land. We pay our respects to the Chumash elders past, present, and future, who call this place Anascoyo, the land that Isla Vista sits upon, their home. We are proud to continue their tradition of coming together and growing as a community. We thank the Chumash community for their stewardship and support, and we look forward to strengthening our ties as we continue our relationship of mutual respect and understanding. With that, we will go to the consent agenda. Does anyone have anything that they'd like to pull? I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the consent.
I would like to just maybe pull the approval of the 18-19 budget adjustments. Is that this piece different?
Yes, we can pull that, and I would say let's tail that to the end. I'm actually going to say let's just tail the entire consent agenda to the end too, because I just realized with the absence of Jonathan that I needed to make the minutes, so I'm gonna get that started. But with that, if everyone's okay with that, I think we'll go briefly into public comment. At this time, any member of the public may speak on matters within the subject jurisdiction of the Board of Directors that are not on the agenda. The board will not take action on any item not on the agenda except as provided for by law. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak? All right, with that, we will close public comment and we will go to discussion and action. The first is the Goleta Library Harwood discussion. We're really pleased to have members of the Goleta Library staff here to lead us through this process. And with that, I'll just feel free to hand it over to you.
Okay, so I am Marie Cruisenberry. I'm here with the Goleta Library. These are my coworkers, Lynn and Esmeralda. Usually our library director, Allison Gray, would be facilitating this kind of conversation, so I'm just kind of filling in, so bear with me, because she's on a business trip, a work trip right now, coming back. So basically, we are here to talk to the IVCSD about the library needs of IV. We're here to have a conversation to better understand your aspirations for the community. So last July, to give you a little bit of background, last July the Goleta Valley Library became an independent library. Before that, the city of Goleta had paid Santa Barbara to manage the library, but we became independent, and now the management is done by the city of Goleta. So we are, the library staff through this Harwood process is going out to speak to as many groups as we can to learn and collect data on what the community wants from their library and use it to help make our work in the community more effective. So that said, I have some questions, and we look at this as like a kitchen table conversation. There's no right or wrong answers. We just want to take down some information that you're sharing with us and to help us learn from you. So the first question is exploring the idea of Isla Vista and the library. What would you want for Isla Vista?
It's a great question. So I'll just honestly just let any board member who wants to just throw out your hand and get started.
Well, I guess I could start. I think Isla Vista, because it's out here on this island and the libraries over across the freeway that I don't know how many, or if you have any census data about how many Isla Vistans actually access the library. And so I guess one of the questions is do we know, do Isla Vistas actually access the library? And I guess some of the ideas I've heard on our board and stuff is, well, how do we get more library services to our constituents? And our constituents include not only a huge student population that's transient, but it also includes families out here who are maybe not real wealthy I don't wanna say they're poor, but there is a poor element to the families out here. And the Ivy Youth Services gives a lot of programming out here to the kids out here. There's a thing that happens in this room where they have tutors and they're, teaching the kids and help tutor them through school. So, library is really important to those young kids. And so it's how do we get either library services here or get them, my idea is get them to the library.
Okay, so, when you talk about the library services, getting them here, like, what do you want for Isla Vista?
Well, we want okay, I'll just give you an example. My kids, when they were raised, got taken to the Goleta Library every day for a whole summer by my babysitter or caregiver or child care provider. And they read a book every day, and they were in the 50 book club for the
reading
summer.
program, we have
And
that.
that reading program was great for my kids. It made a huge difference in their reading ability going forward. And so you go, well, how could the Isla Vista kids get involved in that program? And the difficulty is the parents are all working and the kids are all in programs, and how do you give them the opportunity to go to the library? Because I like the library, I think it's fun, it's a good thing for the kids. And so it's how do you get that service to get them over there?
That sort of gets into part of this question, which is, there are three ideas that have kind of come up to get the community here to be involved in the library, and that is to open up a branch here, to have a bookmobile come out here, or to work with MTD to have a bus service that more specifically goes from here to the library or to the north side of the freeway there, the Cayo Real area. So, what would you like to see to help facilitate what you ideally would like to see, your aspirations for having the community here be a part of the library there? What would you like to see of those three? Or anybody, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
I feel like having the bus in Isla Vista would be amazing because during finals or midterm season, students are packed in the library and they have to sleep there. And so I feel like another library would be a great place to go.
A branch or
Yeah.
the bus?
The bus and then going to this library.
Okay, the
And I
bus.
think our idea is a little bit more than just having public transportation out there. I think we'd like to see library transportation, meaning that regular service between the library and the campus and IV on some kind of shuttle that is, runs during the summer maybe runs during the study jams that they do near the end of the week. So it's kind of like a service that comes out to IV that people can rely on and not have to send their kids out. You're not gonna have a program for the kids and put them on public transportation because they're too young to get on that bus. But
So what about then bringing the bookmobile here, which is loaded with books, plus somebody to facilitate a program, I'm just tossing it out there.
all I know is we got a really cool library over there.
Mhm.
And I know my kids went there and they enjoyed the library. And so I'm kind of stuck in this rut that says, I want the kids in IV
To go
and
there.
the students to go to the facility and really use the library. It's just like Spencer said, he went there, and it's a great place to go get stuff done because it is a library.
Okay, so not necessarily having a branch here.
Well,
Let's-
these guys.
let's
I'm-
Yeah.
go down
There's no
the line.
right
This
or
is
wrong
the rest of
answer,
them.
I'm just
Yeah.
trying to, yeah.
Yes.
These guys are smarter than I am,
Yeah.
they live here.
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna go to Ethan. Thank you. So thank you so much for joining us this evening. I guess starting off as far as what I'd like to see as far as library services, and then I'll get into whether at that branch
Yeah.
or here. But first, just in what I think IB residents could really benefit from. I think definitely the programs for children, that's something that's so important, and that's something that we're already starting to do with the children's literacy program that happens here, family literacy program, and partnerships with the IB Youth Projects and the IB Teen Center. There's lots of potential to continue to grow that, as well as Isla Vista Elementary. And then in addition to children's programs, I think that different language access programs could be really helpful, as well as perhaps technology access programs too, helping improve people's computer literacy, and really focusing this at our working families in Isla Vista. As far as the location and site of services, I feel pretty strongly that while I think it's great that the Goleta Library is accessible and or welcoming to Isla Vista residents because it is their library, I do think that we need to have as many services as possible directly here in the community. We have a great opportunity with the opening of the Isla Vista Community Center in this next year to continue to build upon our local programming, both here at the Community Resource Building and over there in our brand new community center, which we're going to have a lot of opportunities to develop new programs for people to use. Isla Vista residents are paying a lot of money for this branch library, and the per capita fee, I believe it's about $8 per person in the unincorporated area, so that times roughly 16,000 people. It's a good amount of money that's coming from Isla Vista directly for the Goleta Valley Library. So I do think that that return on investment includes services directly here in the community. So I definitely think that having a bookmobile could be something that's great. Whether it's a small branch here, that's great. But whatever the variation looks like, just resources being deployed to Isla Vista. And whether it is having a branch or a bookmobile, I think having the staff capacity to really have engaging programmings will be important, because I know either this summer or the summer before, I guess this past summer, we had somewhat of a startup partnership with the library, and we had books that were brought out here, but there wasn't really any programming surrounding it, which was a great first step. But I think now, as we grow as an organization and with the new status of the Goleta Library, I think we're in a great position to provide direct services here in the community.
I guess I would just say I completely agree with everything that's been mentioned on the children's programming. I see that really as the most important key, is that literacy, and we've been lucky to have the success that we've had with the associated students every single Tuesday, usually right before the sport meeting, but during the school when the college students are here, there is literacy programming and a bunch of different activities for kids, and this room is packed. We usually start our meetings 5-10 minutes late because everyone's getting cleaned up and getting picked up, and so I think there definitely is the demand, depending on where it is that you schedule it. I think another element that hasn't necessarily been discussed is we've talked a lot about how college students in Isla Vista, whether it's UCSB or SBCC, do have access to their libraries and are often there, but I think that doesn't mean that they should be discounted in the equation. I think that one opportunity that we have, whether it's through a bookmobile or ultimately my goal is to see some sort of a branch library out here in Isla Vista. I think there's a big opportunity both to educate people on the Black Gold system so that they can reserve books from other places and get them shipped out specific to their coursework, and also keeping copies of regular textbooks and other sort of books that are high circulation for the student population, especially for these classes that almost every single student is taking. I'm thinking these classes where, to say it's a biology class or where you've got 700 students in this lecture hall, it'd be great to keep some reserves of those sorts of textbooks and make those accessible to students. And I think that really will help in terms of just making the project a success as to bringing the college students in and having sort of that community atmosphere that's all-inclusive. I think that the last thing I was going to mention is, I guess on the transportation, is that I think that I love the idea of MTD, and I think that it's something that, regardless of what the ultimate outcome for Isla Vista is, it's super needed, just because even getting anywhere on that sort of Fairview corridor is kind of difficult from Isla Vista as it is.
Yeah.
But I think that when it comes to the literacy program, I think that it will be really important to have some sort of shuttle transportation that's dedicated for a program like that, because that's really, that reliability of a shuttle like that, I think, is going to encourage participation in ways that really pay dividends as compared to, say, just the public transportation. So I'm liking this list that we're putting together.
And just to clarify, you're saying a literacy shuttle to the Goleta Library versus the program here?
I think that, well, either one would be good, but I know, I'm pretty sure you operate a literacy program during the summer for the kids. Is that correct?
No, not in the true literacy sense.
Okay.
No, we will be having a tutoring program that
Okay.
starts up later at once the school year starts. We had hoped to start it earlier, but it didn't happen. It's through a grant. I forget what it's called right now, but there is that's in place to do. During the summer, we do have the summer reading program. We've been doing that for years, if not decades, for the younger kids, even preschool age, and then the teenagers in high school and whatnot. So, but not a literacy program.
Okay, yeah. Well, I see, we're in our first week of summer, our first full week of summer, and I think we probably all have this feeling that, it's nice when everyone leaves and there's less people in town, but it also opens up a huge gap in service because even with my own example of our literacy program, those students aren't here to provide those services, and there is sort of, I think, this gap, and so I think that could be a really big opportunity when it comes to shuttles for the summer reading program. I'll go to Jay.
So, in bringing this up, I'm not at all defending why this is the case. It's something that's, from context, I think is worth noting, because if nothing else, just to surface whether or not we think that part of what we want out of the library is something to change in this aspect. So I'm on the Goleta Valley Library Advisory Commission to the Board of Trustees, and one of the things that explicitly came up at our last meeting was the idea of whether or not the library, as it currently stands, is or is not a scholarly library. You're pointing out, like,
Is it what
a
library?
scholarly library. You're pointing out, for example, people who are doing research and are interested in getting things on certain topic areas. And there was some context where it kind of caused a question from one of our people on our commission, asked that question, and Allison's response was just a very fast, flat out, yeah, no, we're not a scholarly library. She said that because we have multiple universities in the area that have their own libraries, that's something that for scholarly purposes, there's a vast resource for that. But for all of the popular things, like people who are wanting to read the most recent romance novels that just came out, or interested in getting copies of current magazines and things like that, that was something that the Goleta Library was, in some sense, more focusing on than the scholarly activities.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up because you're absolutely correct. When I did make my little trip to the Goleta Library, one of the things I did, I was actually finishing up a research paper, and I thought, you know what, it might be worth it to see if they have any material in the stacks over here, and did a quick search and got back the answer pretty quickly. No, not really, because I was looking for just history books about 1960s Iran. Now, that's not a point against, but I do think that when I'm talking about these course reserves that are very specific and, again, like I said, high circulation, that's a really good opportunity to bring people in, because in going back to the ultimate question, what do we want from a library? One thing that I think is just so valuable is just the library as a public space where people from the community can come and it can be a quiet place for you to either pull out your laptop and write some emails or write an essay, or it can be a place for you to go and get a book and read. It can be a place for you to take classes. I like that diverse aspect of the libraries, and I think that's something that I ultimately would love to see in sort of an Isla Vista branch. Good to you, Father John.
It is an aspect of community building. The library is such an elegant resource. Even those of us who are introverts, who can get lost for days, even in books. I used to go to Acres of Books in Long Beach, if you've ever heard of that place. It was this famous bookstore that was there. My mother would drop me off there and come back and get me in the evening, and I didn't want to go home. And we had a library in our community there in Long Beach that was right by where we had our sports field. And it was like there was this sort of triangulation for kids between the library and the athletic field and home, and then to school. And one of the first things that we put into when the St. Bridget Fellowship started here for the homeless a couple decades ago, I put in a lending library in there for the folks on the street. And it was an aspect not just of providing the latest romance novel or Western or whatever they happen to read, but also community building stuff. I overheard some conversations that were just remarkable between folks from the street about aspects of some piece of literature. And, you know, here, to encourage that kind of community interaction is community building. And we are all too much on these and not enough on you know, that sort of face-to-face interaction. And, you know, they're at Pescadero Lofts. One of the most successful things that we did there in the residence for folks formerly on the streets is we put a little lending library in there. It's not a lending, you know, you don't check things out. You can either take it or, you know, bring another one back. And we have both books and DVDs, and it's a place where there's community interaction that happens. Anytime we've got a chance to encourage that, we will be fulfilling our destiny to build community here. And that's good stuff.
That's great. Jay?
Well, one thing I brought up occasionally, I think might provide high value for low cost, which is oftentimes also I'm trying to think through aspects of, is right now if somebody wants to borrow a book, they have 2 trips they have to do, one to get the book and one to return the book. Whereas if we had something in Isla Vista, like just a book drop, then people would have to just do the 1 trip to get the book, where they were probably going to explore and decide something anyway, but then they can drop the book off here, and it's less. So I know that there's just staff just to there's staff just to protect the other staff, even essentially at the library, and to outposts can be difficult and shuttles and things, but like this seemed like something that would have the number of trips people had to do, where all you then had to do is occasionally pick this up and apply it. Because my understanding, the library isn't even dinging anyone for turning books back in late anyway. So even if you check it that often, not that
That's
often.
not true.
I thought I'd come during one for
I think some of the libraries in the Black Bolt Cooperative might be moving to that. Goleta has not decided and addressed that.
I only brought that up because it meant that, like, if you only checked the book drop here once every 4 days, it wouldn't matter as much, but like, yeah.
Yeah, no, but just to be clear, we do still charge 25 cents per day for fines at this
Okay.
at this moment. We try and make it easy for you by doing automatic renewals.
That's what, but is it, if it's automatic renewal,
As long as nobody has a hold on the
Okay, all right,
title
yeah.
and you haven't renewed it 5 times, then.
That's what I was remembering.
There is if, you know, you can't check out like where the Crawdads Sing has like almost 400 people waiting in the hold queue for it. And you get it for 3 weeks and you're not gonna be able to get a renewal on it.
Again, I was only bringing it up from the perspective of if, to try to like, even if you were to say, well, having somebody have to come here every day in order to pick up the books is onerous, and it's just like.
Well,
yeah,
how did
it's
you
not
feel then about the bookmobile coming? Because they would collect books too. People could come and return them at the bookmobile. So what about a bookmobile?
Oh, that's, yeah.
Do we have a
heard me that-
bookmobile?
I'm sorry?
Does Goleta Library already
No.
have a bookmobile?
We used to have a bookmobile years ago,
Yeah.
at when we were part of the Santa Barbara system. And then I forget what exactly happened, but we stopped having that. It was sold off. Santa Barbara decided, and so, but it's an option that's, coming to the surface again. Yeah, so,
Okay.
so it's great, because you guys kind of morphed into sort of part of my second part of the question. What do you want your library to be like? Why is it important, or why is that important? And what difference will that make? So you did touch on the differences that it would make to people. But given what was all said, can you distill that down to maybe 2 or 3 of the most important issues or concerns when it comes to a library in IV? Can you just give kind of bullet points, 2 or 3?
Great question, yeah. Okay, so the process of condensing, very difficult because we had a lot of great stuff on that
Yeah,
page.
yeah.
I think for me, the most important issue is access for children to the reading/literacy program, however exactly it's framed, especially over this summer, is really one of the most important things for me.
Number 1.
I think the second thing would be tying in, even though we're not an academic library per se, I think that there are some really easy, low-cost things that we can do to keep common textbooks and course reserves on hold for students to be able to access in the library. And then I think the third one really is the transportation that ties both of those things together. Ethan?
Yeah, and I definitely agree with the first two. So my thought on the transportation is I think that it is important for us to look into it, but I think that's more something with MTD or with the school district, and I wouldn't want us to get too caught up with it in this process just because that could be something that's more expensive, and in looking at everything that we could do, I wouldn't want that to be what we're advocating for these resources to be spent on. And I really think that as a community that is population rich and resource poor, we need to be advocating for things in the community. Even though I totally appreciate accessibility over there,
Yeah.
I don't think we should be outsourcing anything.
I think one of the difficulties that's gonna come up with servicing IB is it's not in your funding model right now. Meaning that we're a major contributor to the budget for the Goleta Library, always have been. I just took a sign out of my garage, campaign sign from the 70s or 80s, that was buried, and it says, "Save the Goleta Library." I should take a picture of it and bring it in. And it was about the campaign to raise more money for the Goleta Library,
Remember that.
to renovate it, and the community did a lot of great things. And I think Isla Vista was in that voting district for the Goleta Library and continued to provide funding, but historically, that was for funding the Goleta Library. Services within the community of Isla Vista have always been, it wasn't affordable, so I don't know how it becomes affordable today. But I think this board says we're underserved right now. So how do you get more service? And so it's gonna be difficult for you to ever build a library out here. I think that, I don't know how we do that. But, everything's possible. So anyway, I just think,
Hopefully we wouldn't have to build and we could use a space.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
So,
too.
yeah.
And I just want to say, just for the record, that I completely agree with what Ethan and Bob said. When it comes to that long-term vision, I think Ethan brought it up, but the number is a little over $200,000 that IB pays, and I understand that you're not the ones who make any of the decisions on this specifically, but it has, I think, led us to feel like for a long time, Isla Vistans have been contributing, these tax dollars, but not really seeing a whole lot of usage or a whole lot of accessibility to the services that existed when it was in the Santa Barbara system and moving forward. And so I think that when it comes to providing these services, there's a lot of energy in the community that is really into this just community programming in general. As Ethan mentioned, the IB Community Center is coming online soon. We've been providing various types of programming in the community room right here for about a year and a half, 2 years, almost 2 years now. And so I think that, we really are, the message that I would like to convey is that if there's the potential for something in IB that is brick and mortar, we want to help and assist and be a part of that process because, it is something that we'd like to see.
Can you clarify what you mean by brick and mortar?
I guess what I mean is programming or, programming and books and a space that is physical rather than something that is purely mobile or purely just shuttles.
So you're saying just things that take place within facilities in Isla Vista?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, because that's my vision too. Like I don't even imagine that other than necessary equipment that Goleta Library staff wants to keep here so they don't have to lug it around so much, I don't even imagine us having to set up so many physical things within our spaces, even when the community center is online. I mean, only what's needed for convenience and keeping the programs going, but my biggest thing is just that there's organized programs here. And another reason I feel so strongly about it is because within our enumerated powers, we as a district do have the power of providing library services. So I think with that, I'm paying attention to all of IV's resources that are going to the Goleta Library and really want to see how we can best partner, just because that is one of the services that we're provided.
That's a great point.
I mean, Goleta City took on a big burden by taking on a regional program that they inherited some regions that are being underserved. And we are one of those areas. And so, so Goleta City is now, needs this help, or we need to come together to provide those solutions. That how do we bring that service stronger into Isla Vista? I mean,
We were always, the Goleta Library was always the library that the IB community used.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
even before the taking over by the city of Goleta, it was, we see students, we see community members, they use the Goleta Library.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
we're still part of the same, it's really just the management that changed.
yeah,
not
it would
really
be
the people
really
that observe.
interesting though to see the census data of, is the community truly served by the Goleta Library?
Sure,
Or-
and that's why we're here, to
Yeah.
sort of get your feelings of, do you feel that we're serving, or how can we serve? Where are our strong points or deficiencies, how can we serve, what you would like to see, which you've articulated very well, because, everybody has a different idea of what they would like to see, so, So, and I guess in some sense, we used to serve IB more because when we had the bookmobile, it was a regular
Yeah.
stop at 2 places, IB School and I think over by Children's
Our
Park.
children's book,
Yep,
yeah.
and
yeah.
so
Yeah.
then that changed, and certainly, we have barely, almost a year now, next week, been at the City of Goleta Library. We're just, you brought up about not being a scholarly library, and well, that's because we were a branch. And the main scholarly library, or the central library, was Santa Barbara Central Library. So now we have become our own library, and so I guess some decisions have to be made as far as what direction to be more scholarly or to tap into resources nearby our library, like the university. What do our community members want and envision? What are their aspirations for our library? And that's why we're here doing this. So to say like more textbooks, to, stuff like that, that's what we want to hear. I'm not guaranteeing we're gonna do, but we're here to learn from you and see how we can implement, some of your aspirations for us.
I guess the only thing I would say, just to follow up, is that, we didn't really have this conversation, but because I think it's a given for so many of us, and this as someone who, we were talking before, you've lived in Isla Vista for many years. We're such a unique community in every aspect. Demographically, there's not a lot of places in the world where you've got around 85% of the population that are college-age folks, many of whom are students, and also a very sizable population of underserved, low-income, often Latinos, many undocumented families. And those are two very unique needs, I think, in the grand scheme of what the Goleta Library does. And so I guess if there's anything that would be a good thing to come away with is that I do think our community requires a certain amount of specialization to hone in on those things.
Spencer's a good example. He's a graduated senior who's been to the Goleta Library once.
Yeah.
Well, and to be truthful, I went for two reasons. Number one, I was in the area and I wanted to go and check it out, but I knew that it was in advance of this conversation. But I can tell you, I don't know if I can speak for our other students on the board, but I don't think it's a very common experience for students, who are college age to even know that the Goleta Library is a resource that exists. And that's something that I think there's a lot of room for improvement on, and especially when it comes to the things that I mentioned,
Yeah, we hope to improve our marketing, actually. That's one thing that we're hearing, that people don't know we exist or don't know what services we provide, things like that. So it's definitely, yeah.
Just as Goleta didn't have their name on that library, it used to never say the city of Goleta. So too, we're a major funder of it, and it doesn't have to say anything about Isla Vista. And so people the branding is really important. That's Isla Vista's library too. So I don't know, that's not.
Yeah.
You're saying we want our name in the library.
No, I'm not
You
gonna
wanna
go
make your
there.
mark. Yeah. What were you gonna
I
say?
just have a question for you, Spencer.
Yeah.
Are there rooms, like private rooms in in the Goleta Library?
That you'd probably be able to
No,
answer that better.
there's only one multi-purpose room that, it's a big room like that.
And do you see
that-
students study there?
You can't study in the room. You can,
Okay.
yeah. What we do see our students studying in, we have like some desk carols.
Yeah.
And yeah, we will see students. Yeah, cubicles. Yeah, cubicles.
Mhm.
But we don't have a whole lot, we're a small, the building may look a little grand, but we're a small library. We're one story. Shelf space is a huge concern, possibly why, we aren't a depository for government docs or anything like that, we have to be careful of what we have because we only have so much space. So there might be a really popular book, and to get, 20 copies of it, once the cycles of holds on it are done, how are we gonna house 20 copies of this one title? Like, it doesn't make room. So there's, a lot of, weeding going on of the books, based on circulation, and, we wanna purchase what the community wants, but, we only have so much space. So, yeah, but we do have some things to help with that, but I'll touch on that at the end about our services. And does anybody have anything more to add for the 2 or 3 concerns or important issues when it comes to the IB library, or a library in IB, or services to IB?
On that list of everything, what are the 2 or 3 you have right now?
Well, that's a good question, because everybody kind of contributed. Do you think we can come to a consensus on like 3 of these to sort of more mark?
Sure, I think we could. I would start by taking the third, transportation, and sort of tying that directly into the first point, which is access for kids, reading and literacy. And then with that consolidated, because I do think it's one and the same, especially when it comes to the summer reading program. And then with that, I would say we keep the top 2, and then we.
The top 2 meaning this one? Or just
yes.
these, the textbooks?
Textbooks for students.
Okay,
or I'd
so
say
this is 1,
college
2,
students.
okay.
And then, let's see, where did it go? Sorry, I'm like reading through it.
Green?
Can you quickly describe how does the summer reading program work?
So the kids come in and sign up for the program, and they get a reading log. And if you're the youth program, you read 5 titles, you put them in your log, you come in and you let us know that you finish your 5 books, and you receive a packet of coupons, you know.
Do the
at
kids
home.
stay and read at the library?
They can,
They
some,
can.
some of them do, they don't have to. Some of them do though, and, you know, we have families who leave with stacks of books, to go home and read them.
So it's not a program where like groups of students come in and they all read together and people help them
No,
and assist
that's,
them to read?
no, because, I mean, we have hundreds and hundreds of kids who participate in the summer reading program, and of all, like, pre-reading, so parents read to them, but they can still be part of the summer reading program, you know, all the way through high school. We do have story time. We have, 3 levels of story time. The really little wiggly, story time, the baby and me, and then the regular preschool story time. And then on the weekends, we have a family story time on Saturday. During the week, there's a bilingual story time, I think, Tuesday afternoon at 4. So there are different story times, but the summer reading program is for individual reading, or, you know, whether it's at the library or at home. And they record in their log and get incentives for reaching certain levels.
I was only a little confused because when my kids went there, I know they went there daily and they did all the reading at the library.
Oh, they did,
So it's
okay.
kind of like,
Some of them do. You see the kids and the parents spend, you know, an hour or so longer at the library, just planted on the floor, you know, reading a book together on the bean bags. We do have a reading to a dog program. So twice a week, it's called Pause to Read, and we have dogs from the Channel City Kennel Club that are certified in some fashion, who come in, and it's to encourage reluctant readers, and it's where the dog, the child, and the handler go into a separate room area, and the child picks out whatever book or books that they want, and they read to the dog. So it's a non-judgmental space. Mom, dad, you know, caregiver is not there. Again, the abilities of the readers can be just, you know, basically kind of sounding out some words. We've had a child who memorized the story because he loved the book and he basically just read it off by memory. But, you know, that's okay, it's pre-reading, you don't have to actually read, you know, it's all encouragement to foster their, you know, love of reading. So we do have some things in the library that are organized, but specifically, the summer reading program is not, you know, you don't have to read there. Yeah.
Well, I guess the last thing I say, having heard that, which that program sounds, that's just heartwarming. That sounds really
I
fun.
want to do that.
I know, yeah. Can I go back to being a kid?
Yeah.
I guess what I would say is really with, like, I guess a highlight on the literacy component, or just programming in general, when it comes to that top line access for kids. Because I think that that's really, you know, when you're thinking about engagement from low-income families that are, you know, cash-strapped and are, you know, have a million different things that they're doing to make ends meet, having that program that you can go, that you know is a set time where you can either be with your child or drop them off, and then come and get them because you know that there's going to be good programming for them. That's really how you're going to get buy-in and participation from that demographic.
And I think that's something we would be interested in. If it's an expansion of services and it serves our community, we'd be interested in maybe funding that. You know, it's not saying, but that's the programming I think Ethan and Spencer are talking about. We want to see some programming that we can invest in.
Some regular, consistent programming here.
Absolutely.
That,
And that's really there's a premium on consistency in Isla Vista just because of the fact that there's so many different things in our community that are a stop and start effort, or you know, there's just so much turnover. So consistency really is, it takes a while, I think, to build those relationships and say, this is a consistent program, it's gonna be here for a while, it has that trust. I'll go to you, Ethan.
Thanks. And I want to kind of explain a little bit more about my wider vision of having more resources here in the community, because I think about how Isla Vista Elementary School, it's an amazing resource here in IV. It's the largest elementary school in the district, and we don't see too many of those families coming to the community resource building. We don't see too many of them participating in programs here in IV. The Recreation and Park District has a great adopted block kids club program, and the food co-op has their sunflower kids club, and there's different things going on. But I mean, my goal, as far as I guess with like the transportation or the concept of just getting people somewhere, is to get the kids and families from Isla Vista Elementary School, the biggest school in the Goleta Union School District, the 4 blocks over to this area here, with the community center when it's open and the programs that we have here now. I think if we can do that, I think we're doing something really well. Because, I mean, I think I'll definitely be a champion when we meet with MTD next about trying to get better bus service for Isla Vista at large, but my goal is really to get those kids from that school here.
That's great. And I guess the last thing I would say is if we're, we got the green marker out now and we're, making the big decisions. The second to last point, you need community specialized services. And I guess specifically, again, back to Ethan's point, the services that are provided in Isla Vista, I would count as one of my top 3. Just because I think that's, really is a good way. We think about where is it that we should start from, but I think that, by having it physically here, that probably is the best place to start rather than sort of a more just shuttle-oriented model or something that's more temporary, because I think that's where you're going to get, the most engagement.
So specialized services kind of goes back to youth-related, mainly.
Well, I think it
Is what
ties
I'm
into
hearing.
both the top 2, also
Okay,
textbooks for students,
okay.
because I
So
think
the
that's
students and the
very
kids,
specialized, yeah.
Okay.
And then also something for like parents and, because that's something too, our staff has met with this group of Isla Vista mothers who meet at the teen center, and one thing that they mentioned, and one thing that we've actually been talking about for years, is a lot of the parents in IB are looking just for more education on various topics and more programming, and I think a part of it too is networking and community building between these parents who are raising kids in this different type of community, this unique community. So I think that, and also the just language access and technology, so just things for kind of that population of adults. And I mean, if we were to go in that direction, we have something for the kids, we have something for students, aiding with textbooks and study / light research, and something for adults. I think that's a good mix.
Absolutely. There you go, that's our 3 prongs.
All right, nice job.
We did it. Just kidding.
Okay, so moving on, is there anything more that anybody wants to add to this? Because I'm gonna change gears a little, and be, well, in a way more specific to, if you do use the public library, it sounds like at least one has visited, what are the 2 or 3 reasons that you go to the library, that people go to the library? Just to help us better understand what motivates you to go there. What are, yeah?
From a student perspective, a lot of students don't go to this library to check out books. I know a lot of students don't go to the library to check out textbooks, but they go for a place to study, because coffee shops can be too noisy, the house can be too full, can be too loud. So just a place and a safe space, a quiet space to study, just like a nice ambiance to work is really important.
I 100% agree with that as a student,
Yeah.
and would just echo that. I mean, I guess like what we've been talking about. If we're talking about just libraries more broadly, as a student, of course, you go there for the research component, or maybe not necessarily hard research, but you go there because you know that there's a course reader that you can check out, or computers, or the textbook that you don't have yet because you haven't bought it, or maybe you can't afford it. That's another big component of it, I think, too. And even though that's not something that Goleta Library provides now, just more broadly. Jake?
One thing I'll bring up, this is a concern that had come up years ago related to usage of the community room and the community center, is that space for students to study is an almost unsatiable need. It's something that you keep providing more space, and students need more space than that. because we have lots of students in the area, and they all need to study, particularly certain times of the year that just everyone's trying to find a place to study. And
Well, that,
um,
I would just say that we've also increased our college student population by
yeah, no, there's all sorts of
100,000.
reasons why
Yeah.
it's just getting it's compounding as a problem. But it's something that there are places that seem like they are more unique in what they're able to provide. And I sometimes would have this concern that when we start talking about, oh, we've got a place where there's some quiet, let's do student studying there. It can essentially like suck out some of the air out of the ability for that place to be what it could have been for the children that might have been there doing reading programs or something. It's just not. It's a difficult thing to try to like describe really, but it's just because it's a balancing act between a lot of parts, and I'm not trying to say that I'm anti anything. I'm just trying to. And I always feel like I have to hedge so horribly on all these things, but like I just want to point out that there's this trade-off when we talk about, oh, there's another place for students to study. We could say that about literally anything that we talk about building. Oh, this garden is a nice quiet place. Like, I bet students could go there and study. But what is something that we could think of for the people who aren't students, or the people, or the students that what is something that students don't get at all right now that the library could uniquely provide them, as opposed to more study space? But
I feel that if we can accommodate to both of those groups, children and students, there can be specific days or during midterm season, final season, you can have specific days for students to come in, and then for other weeks you can have specific days for children and family literacy programs. Just like it's a balancing act, not just for all students. It's not going to be a scholarly library. It could be everything.
So like if the library, I'm just tossing it out there, if like normally we close at 7, Monday through Thursday. So if, say, during finals week, the library stayed open till midnight, and
That's
students
perfect,
could
that's
come
what I
in
thought.
and
Yeah, we could run the
stay
race.
longer, kind of,
Yeah.
something like that to
Yeah.
facilitate
Yeah.
that, because
Yeah.
probably between 7 and midnight, the kids aren't gonna be at the
Definitely.
library.
Well,
The
and
little
I'm-
ones, I mean.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I think in a way that answers sort of Jay's
Oh,
concern,
yeah.
which is that different demographics use these spaces at different times during the day. And especially for students, I think during those study weeks, peak study hours are probably 7 to 2 in the morning, which I imagine there's not a whole lot of, maybe the most dedicated amongst the readers are there at the library. But outside of that, not as much. So.
Okay. So how about as far as like, what can make the library more attractive? Like types of materials, specific types of programs that you'd like to see? Any feedback on that?
Well, in terms of materials, I'll give you a list. No, I'm just kidding.
All the
So-
books that you need.
all the books that are in my closet. No, I think that UC Santa Barbara has many of the professors use course readers, and those are things that are purchased through either associated students or through the Santa Barbara printing shop on campus. And I think that having copies of some of those, especially for those classes that are like the large classes where there's many people in them, could be really beneficial. Again, the same thing goes for textbooks that are the very large classes where they're high circulation books, especially in the library at UC Santa Barbara. And I don't want to keep it just as UC Santa Barbara, because Santa Barbara City College, we also have a sizable amount of their students as well, and they have corollaries for both of those things on their campus. I think, what was the other thing I was going to, programming. We've talked, I feel like we've talked pretty much at length of this. Something that is consistent, that promotes literacy and the love of reading, and is programming that also is intergenerational, I suppose.
Intergenerational. Yeah, I don't know, if you guys are familiar, sort of, the library, offers the traditional books, nonfiction, fiction, all subjects and all reading levels, board books for kids to chew on, to classics and whatnot. But we also offer things like digital downloadables. So I don't know if you know that with your library card, we have a couple different services. Overdrive or Overdrive/Libby, which is a service for ebooks and audiobooks. Another one called Hoopla, which not only has the ebooks and audiobooks, but also movies and music. With Overdrive, you may have to wait in a queue for a popular title. With Hoopla, you get it instantly. And so everybody can have the same thing at the same time. We have another book service like that called Anki, which is more independent publisher books, ebooks and audiobooks. We have something called the Zip Books. So that's something that people don't realize we have. It's through the California State Library. And bottom line is, we're always open to suggestions for us to purchase. So if you find that there's a 2019 title that nobody seems to have in the Black Gold Cooperative, because our library system, I don't know if you know that the Goleta Library is part of the Black Gold Cooperative that goes from Santa Paula all the way up through to Paso Robles. And it's been in place for decades and decades, and we share our materials. So when you go online to our catalog, you're searching the whole catalog for everybody. So a title might show up and only Santa Paula has it, because everybody seems to carry some different things, which is kind of great. You'll see Santa Maria has these things and Santa Paula has these old mystery writers, and so you can place a hold on it, and we'll bring it here for you when it's available for no charge. It'll be waiting for you for 7 days. You can come pick it up and check it out for 3 weeks. Possibly renew it for 3 weeks longer if nobody has a hold on the item, up to 5 times. So you could conceivably have a book for 18 weeks at no charge if you return it on time. But that said, if you find that there's a new book from like 2019 and 2018 at this point that nobody has, that nobody has, you can suggest that we purchase it. And pretty much we will probably purchase it. If your book is older than the current year and the past year, so 2017 and older, and nobody has it, we can look on Amazon and see if they have it for sale. At this point, it needs to be $50 or less, or under $50, and we will order it, order it, and have it delivered to your home. You can keep it for as long as you want, and then return it back to us. And then we will decide whether we want to add it to the collection, or it will go into the sale book area that the Friends of the Library run. So that is a great resource that a lot of people are discovering and are amazed that 2 days later after contacting us, they have this book on their doorstep that they can, keep for basically kind of as long as they want. At no charge to them. So those are kind of some of the services. What am I missing?
I was just going to quickly say, since you mentioned that there's a big Latino parent population here, we're starting this new program where we got a grant. It's an online program called USA Learns, where a patron can make an account free of charge, and it takes them through English classes, different level of English classes, and then ultimately it also has a citizenship study program as well. So it teaches them English and then guides them through the naturalization process as well. And we're trying to get the word out there that it's free, and a lot of people are hesitant because they don't want to sign up for stuff, or they're kind of like untrusting. So we just want to get the word out that it's free, and so it's a great program that we're trying to,
And we're building a little collection.
We are, and we're starting to try and cater to that demographic more. We have a citizenship corner now where we try and put a list of resources in the community that specifically help immigrants, legal resources and others, and then also our USA Learns program, and just other study materials for the citizenship test. Yeah.
That's great.
And we also have Mystery Book Club once a month. We have every Wednesday a group of knitters who knit for charities. It's just a drop-in sort of social group where they just chat and knit and make little hats or beanies and scarves and things, and they send them off to various organizations. We have a film series once a week on Thursdays at this point. In the afternoon, we show a film in our multipurpose room. Very current films. I mean, sometimes, they're just released the week prior.
Tech tutoring.
We have tech tutoring, so people oftentimes have some difficulty with using our downloadable digital services, and they have their device, but they don't know how to get the stuff on their Kindle or their iPad or their phone, and so we have some volunteers come in at this point. I think it's 3 days a week, to come, and you can make an appointment and sit down with them for half an hour or an hour, and they can help you out either with your device in terms of the downloadables or really any question. They will try and tackle it for you and help you out. If they don't have the answer right there, they'll get back to you about it. But, so some people will get a new device and not know what to do with it or all the aspects of using it, or they need help with Word, learning how to do a document, how to post something on Craigslist. We have that help. Let's see. Oh, that's right. We have something that we've started recently called the Library of Things. So,
It's really exciting.
at this point,
I saw this.
yeah,
I saw it
so
when I walked
right
in.
now, it's sort of in a trial thing. Obviously, we have the stuff already, but we have about 40 items that you can check out if they're there from a Moxie Pass. So that is the Moxie Museum down in Santa Barbara. We have 2 passes that allow a family of 5 admission. So you can get it and take your two adults and 3 kids to the Moxie Museum. You get to check it out for 1 week. There's no charge for it. Yeah, it's pretty cool. You have to be a Goleta Library card holder to be able to check that out. There is a hold queue right now for that, but we do have 2 passes, and the checkout period is 1 week, so it goes quicker. But in addition to that, with the Library of Things, we have everything from cake pans and VR goggles and a full-size music keyboard, little devices to teach coding to kids, a record player, some other,
Night vision probably?
there's a whole assortment of things that,
Puzzles.
various puzzles and coloring books for adults with pencils, but technology things too. Like, I'm not even sure what they all are. We have all that you can come and check out for free with your library card. So we're kind of developing the collection, and trying to work on a lot of programming. Usually once a month with the Friends of the Library have a very interesting talk on Sundays to attend. Many times it's a UCSB related professor or something, interesting topics.
Really quickly, if you don't mind me asking.
Yeah.
We have all of these great services that we're really happy about, and we want to get it out there to the public. Are there any recommendations on marketing or anything that would be helpful to target the Isla Vista community to let them know, at least, 1, that we're out there, because a lot of people don't know that we're out there, and 2, all of these great programs that we have?
That is a great question. I think that when it comes to sort of the first demographic that we talked about being the families, my advice would be really to rely on the expertise of the organizations that have been serving these populations for so many years. The Isla Vista Youth Projects is the first that comes to mind. The St. George Family Youth Center through the Channel Islands YMCA is another. I think really they are at the forefront of being the best place to reach these types of folks. When it comes to students, I think that the answer is a little more complicated, just because I know just as a UCSB student, it's very easy. The university throws a lot of different information at you at once, so I don't know if going through them is always the best way to reach people. But I think that if we're just talking about marketing, then you got to meet people where they're at, and I think social media is one of those places. And I think that
Can you be specific? So like Facebook, Instagram,
I'd say Facebook and
Facebook and
Instagram
Instagram.
are probably
are those the 2 that, we do have Facebook.
Yes.
We don't have Instagram. I think the director has been trying to get that, but,
Mhm.
yeah, but we do have Facebook.
I would say like print a banner within your library with your Facebook username and have people like your page so they can see your updates. That's-
Oh, yeah, you should make
yeah.
people like your Facebook
Or
page
even
in
a
order to
website,
get a,
yeah.
well, maybe not. I was gonna it should be front and center though.
Like tabling places.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we actually,
Yeah.
for the IVYP food distribution, the first Thursdays, we were, the last 3 months at that. So,
That's great.
Yeah, it was a good way
That's
to reach
great.
out to.
I think that, yeah, when it comes to marketing to students, you know, once you've got that one thing, I think that the idea you throw out there about finals week is an amazing idea. And if there was a big marketing push around that, because there's finals week for UCSB, there's finals week for Santa Barbara City College. I'm pretty sure they fall sort of 1 week apart for the fall quarter. But then there are some finals weeks that are happening over the summer for summer school students. You know, I think that's a prime time to be able to market, because I feel like the library is one of those places where once you know that it exists and you've been there, you're gonna keep going back. And so, I mean, now that I've, you know, I guess been to the Goleta Library, I will continue to go back because I know what kind of a space it is. And so, that's a really great way, I think, to focus your marketing. Okay, cool.
Let's see. Do you have any suggestions for what is important for the library to keep in mind in moving ahead? I mean, many of the things that you've talked about have touched on it, but
Absolutely.
any other, suggestions, to keep in mind? So really our demographics here in IB, our community that we're trying to serve, sounds like what you have said.
Specialization to those demographics, I think, is really the most important thing. Consistency, especially when you're talking about services that are marketed more towards families, is also incredibly important.
And at the beginning, we talked about the 3 options, the bookmobile, the branch, and the bus, the MTD. After talking, do you have any more thoughts about what you feel might be a first choice? Or if you had to put those in order, like what you would like to see? Because I'm hearing, going to the big library, which I know I've heard people talk about, like, the bus, because it's a great, what do I want to say? It's a memorable experience for kids to go to the library, So I can see that aspect of it, that they went to the big library. But having the branch here, if it's consistent and it provides the programming and specialization, maybe it can do that more here in the community than over there. Having the bookmobile is kind of it can come here and be specialized and be here too, but it isn't the same as an actual brick and mortar building. So any more thoughts about those 3?
Great question. I think so. I don't know if you have something to say, but I feel like we've said a lot about sort of what we think. Would everyone mind if we just go down the row and just rank them without any commentary? Rank those 3 options. Okay, so mine would be branch library, transportation, and then bookmobile. Want to go ahead?
I'm also the same.
Okay.
But
I'll-
number 1 and 2 are the same for
So
me.
branch, and then what was your second choice?
Transportation.
The bus, and then the bookmobile.
Mhm.
Okay.
Are we saying that in order we want to see them occur in, or are we saying a which one is more important? Like, I mean,
This
that's
is
totally different.
ranking by importance to us. That's how I'm thinking of it.
Sure. I guess in a perfect world, if you got to choose,
Yes.
I feel like your question was kind of like, well, what should we do first? And that was-
not necessarily
wasn't-
first. No, I think if you can only choose one.
If we can only choose one.
If you can only have one,
All right.
what would you concentrate on trying to have? What would you aspire to if you could only have one of these?
I like that phrase you use, in a perfect world if you can only have one. So yeah, and I just said rank, so.
And I just want to clarify, for branch, we're talking about, like, that would include having services in our existing facilities here, right? Like, that's,
Yes.
we're thinking that.
We couldn't build
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, okay,
At
just-
least I shouldn't speak for the city or the
Yeah.
library necessarily, but that would, you know how hard it is. I mean,
That would be
how
challenging.
many years, if not decades, have they been trying to get
Yeah.
a community center here in
Yeah.
Ivy?
I-
And when I was on the Ivy Park District Board, we talked about it.
Okay.
So, yeah, so,
Long time
I just want to make sure
Yes.
that the people who see this, like, because I know we're on the same
yeah,
page, but those
okay,
who
yeah.
see this.
No, to
yeah,
use an
what we
existing
mean. Okay.
space for a branch, yeah.
Great point. And then Christy,
The
you,
first two for me are interchangeable, and the last would be the bookmobile.
The last, okay.
okay. Ethan?
And for me, it would be the branch and then the bookmobile.
And then the last would be the bus.
I wouldn't include the bus, so just.
Perfect
Oh.
world, we don't even want one.
No bus.
Yeah, well, I want to talk to MTD about that.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Father John?
As much as I have fond recollections of the bookmobile with our kids, decades ago, I definitely want us to have a branch here at some point. And I think that involves seeing the Goleta Library as sort of the mothership. I mean, I think a more robust connection with Goleta Library, our support of it, expansion of it, and so forth. Transportation is, I'm just kind of stuck on the branch myself.
Okay, yeah.
Jay?
Yeah, so for a perfect world, what do I want in what order? Branch,
Yeah.
bookmobile, bus.
Yeah, okay.
And what would I implement in what order? I would have said bookmobile, bus, branch. But
You were going to have all of them.
If I were the manager in charge of making
In
this
your
happen,
perfect
yeah.
world, to have all of them, yeah.
Bob?
I don't have a perfect world on this one. I mean, I think they're all great ideas. I just would need a lot more thought about what would work. I don't know where you put a physical branch here. I think if we use the community room as a place for library services and a bookmobile comes out and provides that service and you couple the two together and we have good programming in the community service, I think that's a great idea. And that's better than my idea probably. I still would like to see us have some kind of occasional use of taking people over to the Goleta Library, and especially for kids and stuff. And I know what worked for my kids, so I kind of get stuck on
Yeah.
that. But, when you have a branch here and you are bringing books to the kids and they have a nice community center to provide library services in, that's just as cool to me. So, and I kind of agree with Ethan and Spencer and everybody, it's better here. I mean, if it's all possible, and we do have a cool facility coming around, so.
Amazing facility.
Yeah.
Your comments about with the way that I rephrased it in a different way, if I wanted all of them, what order, that's not, I look at a lot of these things in terms of well, branch sounds like it would take time for us to figure out how to pull that together. In the meantime, maybe we could have a bookmobile serving some of the aspects of the branch. Maybe once you have a branch, you don't need a bookmobile, or maybe you still do. Or in the case of the bus, maybe it takes longer to coordinate the intergovernmental issues in order to deal with the bus through SBMTD, or maybe that actually it doesn't provide some of the immediate upsides. I mean, I love Ethan's comments about bringing services into Isla Vista, and so that's why it's just the bookmobile might be something that is more reusable for other communities and therefore easier to get quick buy-in into. It's something that just the library can think about doing, and then we could quickly get some services in here while we coordinate with MTD in order to try to get some bus line to get us the rest of the services from there. And then in a longer period of time, we can think about having a branch here. I'm just practically, I feel like that kind of discussion thinking is a little more useful quite than in a perfect world, I want a branch, but now what?
But the last thing, you described all these other neat services you have that you're trying to market, and just like you can pick up the Moxie passes, that might not exist in our branch, and therefore, it'd still be kind of cool if our residents could get those services, and we do get them to the main library to participate in that stuff. Even some of the people that live in Friendship Manor probably, I don't know if they go access the library, but it was more Father John's thinking of bringing people together to they get a sense of community and they get to meet people and do things with people and go to the, that's important too.
Yeah, connection.
Yeah, the connections, right.
I've actually got some folks from Friendship Manor that come over to Pescadero Lofts there to make use of our library. They come over and borrow books and movies from us, so.
Great point.
We have a library, come to think of it, in Isla Vista.
Okay, well, is there anything else that you, would like to ask, or,
I don't know if anyone has anything else, but I just wanted to say to all
Okay,
three of
thank
you,
you.
thank you very much for coming and
Great.
for
You're
listening
welcome.
to us speak. I think this has been great. I'm really excited for the potential partnership moving forward.
Yeah, like as I said, we're just trying to learn and get information, because there has been talk about the underserved in IV, but we need to understand what that means. You can't just say, well, we want a library. There's a lot.
What does that mean?
There's a lot as part of that, what do you want, like library for little kids mainly, books for adults, books for, what does that mean? And it's money too, so we wanna, we need to make sure that we have our data that shows what, we should be doing, with the money that we have, so, yeah.
Absolutely.
Overall, I think what I would say is it's access to the services that the library offers. And I don't know how you get there, but you're over there and we're over here. The community's over here and the library's over there. And that freeway's a barrier between that. And it's, I don't know, people just don't get around the block over there.
That's a great point. Well, you three
Thank
have
you.
very important
Thank you.
jobs, and we're excited to see what's to come.
Yeah, well,
Thanks
thank
for
you
having
very
me.
much.
Thank you.
I should say hi to you. Yeah, good to see you.
Yeah, a lot of years.
We live catty corner from each other, our backyards
Awesome.
for 19 years.
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yes.
very nice to see you.
Good to see you too.
Bye-bye.
Have a good night, take care.
Okay. So with that, we're gonna move on to the rest of our discussion and action items. 4.2, facility use agreement with STESA for Suite 101C. So, this is an extension of the agreement that we have previously signed with, I believe, one edit to Exhibit B, if you read over it, point 1. Provide crisis intervention and counseling services to survivors of sexual assault and their loved ones in a safe and supportive environment in collaboration with the University of California Police Department Community Service Officer Program. So this reflects the changes that we had talked about at the board before about an agreement with the UCPD in order to make sure that advocates, when they come to do counseling, sort of have that second person there. And other than that, I believe that the agreement is essentially the same as when we signed it before. Yes.
This program has been operating.
This program has not been operating
Not been
yet
operating, okay.
because there has,
We had the agreement in place, but they weren't able to.
the agreement is in place, and that has been, enabled us to begin purchasing the furniture, and more of that has been purchased as to this point, but it has not been operating yet to my knowledge.
So this is our first approved facility use agreement, right? Like, we don't have an agreement that's approved with them currently.
I thought we did have a facility use agreement, or we had.
Cause I think we, like, we clarified with the county what we could do with the space, but I'm not sure that we've entered into an agreement with STASA, cause otherwise this would be like an amendment, right?
Well, I thought it was an extension, but honestly, you could be right. I think that, I know we've had this in front of us before, I just can't quite remember if it was approved.
Unless perhaps our last contract just expired, that might have been the
That-
case.
that was-
That's actually probably the case.
That was what my understanding was, but I'm not entirely sure.
I don't think I remember that formal agreement, so I think this is it.
Okay, all right.
I mean, it seems to me, I think.
I'm conflating the contract with the facility use
Yeah.
agreement.
That's right, yeah, 'cause
Yes,
we
yes.
did enter in the
That's
agreement
what I
with
am.
STESA for the program.
Yes, that's correct. So
Okay.
this is what will be the mechanism by which they can begin providing the services.
Cool.
So does anyone have any comments on it?
I'd like to thank all of you for continuing to push this, thank Jonathan and Ross for getting this ready, and thank Elsa, STESA team, and SASA for advocating for this.
Any other board comments? All right. With that, I will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the facility use agreement with Standing Together to End Sexual Assault to operate a pilot survivor resource center.
I will second that motion.
Pilot Survivor Resource Center. Okay, this is a very rough thing, but the motion is to approve the facility use agreement with STESA to operate a Pilot Survivor Resource Center made by Bertrand, seconded by Freeman. Is there any public comment?
Any further board discussion?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 6-0 with 1 absent. Okay, with that, thank you everyone, that has been great. We're gonna move on to item 4.3, IVCSD representative on the Isla Vista Community Center Advisory Board. We have the Community Center Advisory Board. The structure, of course, has been set. Just a little bit of an update. We've been sending out follow-ups to all of the different organizations that we've asked to provide a representative. And I believe that IVRPD, I don't know if they have sent us who it is yet, but I know that they either have taken action or are going to in the very near future. I think that they have taken action. But other than that, I think we're still hearing back from some of these organizations. So that's why we don't have a full host of people to appoint at this meeting. But I think that we're going to continue to bug all the different organizations to get someone appointed to that board, because as is mentioned in Jonathan's report, there's ongoing interviews for the community center executive director position. This is really a great opportunity for us to just set our point person for the community center advisory board. So with that, I would just say I would be happy to serve as the representative. I think it's a really important thing. I want to entertain if there's anyone else that is interested in doing it, before we move forward. But I think that this is a really important thing, and I think it will be good just in general that the president of the board is the person that is sort of the liaison to this.
Do you know how do the terms work? I mean, like if we say, can we say appoint Director Brandt to do this, or do we say appoint the president to sit on this board? How often would the board member change, or is it like a long-term appointment?
I believe that we can change it whenever. I'm not sure if when we created the board, if there was terms set for people, but I would have to go back and look at that.
I mean, it probably doesn't matter, but it's just like, I think the president has more vision and is more involved in the ongoing daily operations of this place, so I think that, it's.
I could see a situation whereby.
I just want to say, sorry, before we continue, I'm just going to call in Jonathan because he just texted me and said that he can call in and hear better now. Because he may be able to answer that question about the terms. Hey, Jonathan, you're on speakerphone. We're in the board meeting. There was one question that was raised. We're on item 4.3, the Community Center Advisory Board. as to what the term length of the membership is.
Yeah, okay, cool. I got really confused because the video I had was way behind. So when you called me, you were actually talking. And I was like, how is he calling me while talking? But so I can hear it now. My phone's ringing on the TV. Anyways, let me turn this off. This is really weird. Give me 1 second.
The live stream's on a 30-second delay.
Okay. All right. I'm on. Can you repeat your question?
So the question was as to the term length of members of the Community Center Advisory Board.
Yeah, it's 2 years.
2 years, okay. So I think that it probably would, just for continuity purposes, be better to appoint an individual rather than a position. But my intention with it is that if there was a change in leadership, then it is best suited for whoever president is to be the one to serve on this board. Especially just in this very crucial startup phase. Jake?
I agree with appointing a director for continuity, but partly because of that, I feel like if the president gets changed in January, I don't want the person we appoint to that to step down, so that that president can step up in order to then cause, like, when we appoint somebody new in January is doing that thing. I feel like we should just have directors get appointed to this for 2 years, and then, but.
Okay.
I'll make a
also-
motion to appoint Director Brand to a 2-year term.
I'll second.
Oh, I was gonna ask if Ethan wanted to do it.
I appreciate the ask. I support him.
You okay? All right.
Yeah, but thank you for checking.
We have a motion made to appoint Spencer, made by Geis, seconded by Bertrand. Is there any other discussion on this? Any public comment? Okay, well, I will be excited and happy to serve as the rep to the Community Center Advisory Board. I know that this is going to be a great group, and I'm really looking forward to it. With that, I will call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 6-0 with 1 absent. Okay. So with that, we're going to jump back to consent agenda. So Bob had pulled item 2.4.
Hey, Jonathan? Jonathan?
Yeah, hey.
Hey, can you help explain these little budget transfer, the 18-19 budget adjustments you're suggesting?
Yeah, totally. So, let me open the file let me open the file real quick. And did you all get my email earlier today that has some notes on them?
Yes, and that should be in front of you as the
Yeah.
report.
Okay, cool. So, the budget adjustments are basically, when we had made the budget last August, we had set the cost of the interpersonal investigator at 162, which was the full year cost. So the budget adjustment is just making it the shortest cost because it was 3/4 of the year. So when we have our budget end, it'll look like we spent the whole budget rather than it'll look like we underspent, which we didn't really underspend it. And then so that's the same on the revenue side. And then the third one is, this is something you and I have talked about, Bob, the moving the SRC painting and carpeting from a capital expense to a services and supplies.
Mm-hmm.
But that just, we'll figure out the line item and put it in, but that's the intention.
Okay.
And then, the last one is, when we had done the budget last year, we had budgeted the unused UCSD money that we hadn't even actually received a check for as an unallocated, program. And when we did the budget this year, we decided not to do that. And so, this would just align 18-19 with 19-20, where the unallocated UCSD money is just not reflected on the budget.
So we're only doing these for like, we don't necessarily have to do these budget adjustments, they just show variances?
Yeah, it's just a cleanup.
Yeah, it's just, normally when we do a budget adjustment, we should have a two-sided entry. So let's say if you were reducing your revenue in 4840 from 301,000 to 207,000, when you get rid of that revenue estimate, it needs another side to the entry which says, well, then you reduce appropriations somewhere. So if you put in an entry, it says unanticipated revenue, or unrealized revenue of $100,000, then you're supposed to drop your budget by $100,000. You have to identify where you're going to drop that budget. So, then you have a variance on both sides that's just caused by, I don't know why we put 301,000 in at the beginning. We just thought we were going to ask for more money than we planned for. That was the original 96 that we were going to get from last year. So I just don't know, in making budget adjustments, what we want to stay within is our legal appropriations. You don't necessarily have to make these cleanups just to make it look like, things that we did it right at the beginning. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's not a big deal if we don't want to do it.
I don't know, I just asked the rest of the board how would they have to look. You're right, it does create these variances, but by getting rid of like the unrealized revenue, then you have a difference between your original budget and your adjusted budget. And normally when you're writing a financial statement, you have to explain why you made those changes. So you have to explain it either way.
Well, it sounds like what Jonathan is saying is that the only reason that we would do it is for cleanup, which I think there are some benefits to that. But if it's not something that's necessary and you think is just, I don't know, out of the norm, then.
No, well, I think the one where we're talked about where we have the money, we spent the money in the 8,200, which is the fixed asset line item. If we would transfer that up to other services and
Yeah.
supply accounts, I think we should do that budget transfer.
Okay, yeah,
And
that makes
then,
sense.
Jonathan, the one on the 43,000, I'm trying to understand that a little bit better. That's we budgeted to release the 43,000 from the reserve. And
No, not really. What we had done is we made a program called 1002 UCSD unallocated, and the line item we used was increase the fund balance. And we put the 43, which was just unallocated. And so it's reflected in, the idea was when we did spend it, or when we did request it and, put it into a new program's budget, we pull the 43 from program 1002 and move it to the other program that actually didn't get funded. That was what we had talked about last August, but we never ended up actually doing that because we didn't request the money. So it just looks like in our budget now, 43,000 increased fund balance.
that's per the budget, but you still, if you were actually gonna move that money, you'd have to do an actualizing transaction. This might be going over everybody's head. So, I'm trying to think of how we could authorize, I don't know how to do this quite if the board hasn't, in the county, when we adopt the budget, we usually give the authority to the general manager and the auditor controller to do transactions to bring the budget in line. And that includes maybe putting some money in reserves and stuff. And then after the books close, if we don't have a meeting before the books close, we just take those back to the board and have the board authorize those retroactively. I've never had the board of supervisors say, no, go undo them, because the books have already closed, so if we're careful how we do those, I think we could authorize them after the fact. So, I would just make a motion, see if this works. I just make a motion to give the authority to the general manager to make the necessary budget adjustments to close the books. Does that ring a bell? Does that make any sense to anybody?
I think that's where we should go, but maybe Jonathan and Bob do some more, talk some more and come up with just a board memo for the next meeting. Jonathan can put together with just a recommended action, and
Okay.
then we do that.
Yeah.
The problem is the next meeting's gonna happen after we already close the
Okay.
books. Cause we're not gonna have a meeting before July 10th.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
So-
are we agendized to act on this today?
Well, we're
We're agendized to act on this.
We have approval of 18-19 budget adjustments. If we just extend that to say, give the general
Well, with-
manager
with that.
authority to
Yeah.
approve, well,
Okay, so in that case,
I would change
think-
approval to something else, that you're really gonna approve them once you see them in their proper form after the fact. I mean, I don't know how, this is kinda
So-
coming up at the last
so
minute.
my suggestion would be, because your idea is to authorize the general manager to make the necessary budget adjustments to close the books. And I would add to that and bring us a brief report back of what those adjustments were.
That's good, that's a
Okay.
good motion.
Yeah, that's,
Okay, but I'm not gonna make the motion because I'm the chair, so.
So was that your motion?
That's my motion, yeah.
I'd second that.
Jonathan, any thoughts?
No, that works. Bob and I are meeting, on Thursday to do all this stuff, so we'll work it out.
Okay. Okay, so the motion is to authorize the general manager to make the necessary budget adjustments to close the books and bring back a report to the board. That was made by Geis and seconded by Hedges. Okay, any public comment? Any more board discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 6-0 with 1 absent. Okay, now we have the balance of the consent agenda.
Motion to approve the balance of the consent agenda.
Motion made by Bertrand,
I'll second that.
seconded by Hedges. Any public comment? Any board discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 6-0 to 1. Okay, with that, we are going to move to item 5, reports. And we're gonna start, I think it actually would be good to start with Jonathan's report, which I believe everyone has in front of them. And I think we've all read, but wanted to just give you an opportunity to speak on anything, Jonathan.
Yeah, hi everybody. Like I said in my email, guys, I think this is my second meeting ever I've missed, so glad I'm not there, especially for the end of the year. But the conference was really excellent. I think I learned a huge amount that's gonna help us in the next couple months, especially with, our retreat and talking about our strategic plan and things like that. And I learned a lot actually just at the end about performance measurement and how to measure our effectiveness better. So I'll present everything and I'll send you all the slides so you can see what I saw as well. Next on Thursday of this week, we're doing the community center director interview. If anyone is interested in being a part of that, we can have up to 3. It's from 9-12 is the commitment, so let me know. And I'd like some board members to participate, but it's not going to be all consecutive. It's going to be 2 separate times on either of those days. So I don't have the time yet. I'm still working with the interviewees, but I'll have that probably tomorrow afternoon. And then the census work is, pretty exciting. We had a meeting with the Attorney General on Thursday about the citizens' questions because they thought it was going to be released then. But we did get a definitive answer in terms of students, that the message for them will be wherever you live on April 1st, 2020 is where you get counted. Just like there's similar issues with that voter registration. There's a question if they should do it here or somewhere else. It's definitive where you live on April 1. That was good to get clarification on. And then I volunteered to help write, help the census, our messaging towards IVCSD students. So that's what I'll be helping on is the census. I'm working on the space plan, lots of good development on that. We'll be ready for July. Been working a lot on the transition to the building hose. That's been interesting, just figuring out how much people do know and don't know, but it's been good. We're learning a lot. The audit's done pretty much. We just have to actually sign something that they completed it and send it back. I would need the wet signature, so it's get delayed until tomorrow, but we're on time with the audit, which is great. And you'll get it at the next board meeting as the item, and the auditors will be on the phone to present. And then the mediation program, we have our first landlord-tenant mediation scheduled and ready to go on Tuesday. They've all been tenant-tenant, or the landlord resolved it over the phone for mediation. So this is our first tenant-landlord one. So that's great news. And I think, the last, a lot of my time is gonna be spent this week finishing up the year-end accounting and the interview for the position. And then we'll wrap up this great year. So thanks for a good year.
All right, thank you, Jonathan. Any questions for him from members of the board? Okay, with that, we'll move on to reports from members of the board. Any board members have reports they'd like to share? Jake?
Last night, the Park District hosted the California Special Districts Association's local chapter meeting in this room, and I attended that. And Jane Gray, who's also on the Goleta Valley Library Advisory Commission with me, and she's the vice chair of the Regional Water Quality Control Board, gave a talk. Good meeting. Lots of people showed up from various areas, and it seemed like it increased the visibility of a lot of issues in Isla Vista. People were asking questions about things that had been going on in Isla Vista and what our responses to those things have been. Additionally, I finally found a camera that does not overheat during the course of the entire meeting. So this meeting was live streamed, and so that Jonathan could watch it. The audio quality has some things I can fix, but it's all fixable because now it's all in software. I can actually finally fix all these things, and so yeah, that's gonna be a lot better.
That's great. That's very positive.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you for the report, Jay. Any other members of the board with reports? Okay, I'll give mine. So the first is I have really positive news to report on the lighting expansion plan. Myself and Will Robertson and Kevin Thompson from Santa Barbara County Public Works Department, they're both engineers. After we had our lighting walk where Christy was there, Jonathan was there, Christian Ornelas, the EVPLA elect, was there, as well as Supervisor Hartman, members from Wool Public Works, and also Foot Patrol and UCPD. We sort of all mobbed out together and looked at the lights, and the agreement we came to at the end of the night is that Jonathan and I were going to work with Will and Kevin to identify poles in Isla Vista that don't currently have street lights on them, where they would be candidates for additional fixtures. And so earlier today, after doing a number of walks, both with them and just on our own with myself and Jonathan, we submitted to them a list that includes 36 poles that could have additional fixtures on it. They independently compiled their own list as well, and we just saw it actually right before the meeting. There's also contains 36, so that was really positive. I haven't looked at the specifics yet, but I think it's good that we're in the same ballpark. What they have committed to is that we're going to sort of have a list that prioritizes the top 20 of those polls, and then work with them to get a cost estimate back. So tomorrow, myself and Jonathan are going to meet with Lieutenant Camarena, and we are going to look at the lists in relation to crime activity and work with him to see, get his input on the prioritization of those polls. So I think this is a really positive step. It's the most concrete thing we've had so far out of our sort of efforts, and I look forward to bringing back more information once it becomes more solidified.
How come they only want to do 20 out of the 36 and not go for all 36?
So this is, again, this is 20 to do a cost estimate,
Oh, okay.
but it's a good question, and, it
'Cause I thought it was
is worth saying.
inexpensive to put a new arm on.
It is inexpensive. We've heard the number is around $200. Another aspect of this that I'll also mention is that we've identified a number of lights where our SoCal Edison map says that the wattage is 54 watts or some other number, but it ends up being the next level down, like say 40 or 41. And so that was another thing that we spoke with them about, is the potential of moving those back to what the map says that they're on. I don't really know what the reason they are, that they don't match up, but I think the working theory is just that the contractor messed up when they were installing new lights. Regardless, I think that's important for us to keep pushing on as well. There are a couple of areas that we identified too on our walks, as we did both when we were the big group and also individually, where I think there's a role for IVRPD to play in terms of increasing the amount of lighting, both that is in parks that have paths that are meant for pedestrians to walk through them, but also in terms of being a space where poles that are located on their property could be used to light the street below it. Just walking around today, actually, is one of the first times that I noticed that I think there's the commonly held belief that there's just no lighting in the parks at all, which there are some lights in the park, and not just lights that are sort of these smaller ones, but large light poles that have lamps on them that are, basically street lights. And so I think that, it's important for us to keep that in mind as we move forward, and we talked a little bit about maybe some potential resistance from them on that front. This is something that they are already doing, and so I'm optimistic that if we make the case for specific areas that, there's a board that could be interested in that. So I will bring more information as we continue to work with Will and Kevin. They've been good partners so far.
I just have a comment on that whole walk, that when you get out there, it's so eclectic what's going on around here. I still think there needs to be some kind of long-term plan for improvement. I don't know what that is, but if you walk with Will, who was the lighting expert, he was saying that in a normally designed neighborhood, you would have lights on both sides of the street. You have a light, then you'd have a light, you have a light. And down on, what's the one that has that? Well, I don't know if there are.
Camino Corto.
Camino Corto has that. And so, long-term, the whole design on one side of the street is just deficient because that's where the sidewalk is, that's where the poles are in the middle of the sidewalks, and there's wires all over the place, And so, the long-term plan should be undergrounding and, good sidewalks and good lighting on the sidewalks and the streets. And I think we just need to keep, it might be incremental how we do it. They have 50,000, maybe we somehow use our 50,000 for maybe park lighting, but there just seems to be, we shouldn't get satisfied with 36 and say, okay, we fixed the problem, because they did convince me, when I was out here a long time ago, those incandescent lights, if you guys think it's not lit now, when those incandescent lights were in here, it was terrible. And so the lighting was to me, much better than when I was here a while back. And there were still some of those incandescent bulbs that they go, oh, they missed that one and they missed that one. And you could really tell the difference, so.
Yeah.
We should give them credit that they have upgraded the lighting to some nicer standards. I mean, it is better, and so, but I just think the long term, you just gotta stay at it and incrementally go after this place.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things on my to-do list is, there's a specific, I guess, fund that's, I think, from
Southern California.
SoCal Edison or CPUC for undergrounding. And it's on my to-do list to, maybe we should talk about it, but just seeing where that money is going, because sure not being spent here in Isla Vista.
Yeah, well, the controversy, the problem with that, the Southern California Edison Fund is for the entire county, and so.
Yes.
You know, you're competing with
With
places
a lot of
like.
different areas, yeah.
Different areas
Yeah.
that, any neighborhood that has undergrounding is so much better than where they have overhead lights. Even in my own neighborhood, my area is all undergrounded, and the neighbors across the street have wires that they have to look through their backyard at. And
yeah.
so, it takes a lot of money to do that undergrounding.
Well, that's a great point.
But-
And we will.
But if you wanna,
provide
if
updates.
you wanna see a mess, you just have to walk down Trigo and Del Playa, and that, going that way, it's a mess. I mean, I've never seen such a wiring mess.
Well, I will say that, this is the last point on this, but when we adopted the preliminary lighting expansion plan, we, I think one of the streets that we left out of that was Trigo. And I give credit to you, Christy, for bringing this to our attention and reminding us that Trigo, although it you know, on paper has the brighter lights, still has a lot of lighting issues. And when we were out there looking at potential pulls, there were a number of them that we found. So that will be a big part going forward with the lighting plan. So the second thing I wanted to report, just as in general, is that I want to bring to the board the issue of move out. Every year that I've been here, it's been a mess, and we hear about these different programs that are in place to try to keep it from becoming such a mess, but I think that we should have a more full board discussion, possibly with Marburg or with County Public Works Code Enforcement, to try to figure out what the state of what's being done now is, and how it can be improved, both with our existing programs, the beautification program, and also potentially with us stepping in and providing support. I think it'd just be good for us to learn about everything before we go down that road, though, because you know it really is. I mean, it continues to be a mess in a lot of places, and I think there are potential ways that we can make the move out experience for students easier, while also not turning Isla Vista into this giant sort of trash bin when everyone moves out. So that, I think, would be a good discussion. I think the last thing that I was going to say is that I graduated, so I'm really excited about that.
Bravo.
When I first came here to UCSB, it was to go to UCSB, and I think that I didn't necessarily always tell people I found a home in the community, but it wasn't because of UCSB, it was because of Isla Vista. So I'm really excited to be continuing living here, and really just encourage all those else that are students to potentially do the same, because I think that that's really how we sort of live that culture change and keep it going. So very excited for that. And with that, I think that's the end of my report. So now we can move on to reports from committees. I don't think we have any, but I will say that the Committee on Ordinances is going to meet tomorrow at 5 p.m., either by phone with Ross, I believe.
I'll be on phone.
Say again?
I'll be on phone too.
Yes, okay. And should have a good discussion. We can bring something back. Jonathan, is there any report from District Council?
No.
Okay. That means that we have concluded reports. We're in future meeting dates and agenda items. So I've mentioned to a couple of you the potential for doing a meeting instead of on July 9th, I believe it is, on July 12th, which is the Friday at 2 p.m. I've got you all here in the room, with the exception of George, so just wanted to check and see if that's something that works.
The 9th, I'm having a knee replacement.
So we
I
would-
will probably be off the books on the 12th,
I see, okay,
yeah.
okay.
And you're not available on the 9th, because that's the day of the surgery.
I definitely will not be available on the 9th. No.
Jonathan, go ahead.
You wouldn't want me here.
Hey, I was gonna tell you, I had a family thing come up on the 12th that,
Okay,
like, gesture, so I might not be able to be here.
okay, so we're gonna need to go back to the drawing board with this then,
Is there
probably
not a
focusing
quorum on the 9th?
on the 11th. Well,
On the,
the 9th, it wouldn't work for me. I know that it wouldn't, it's a very heavy meeting. It has a lot of things because we backed a bunch of stuff up from this meeting since Jonathan couldn't make it. So I would like to be able to be here and have Jonathan be here too. So,
Can I suggest that we maybe do a retreat and a regular meeting, and we can do the more business at the regular meeting, and some of the more meatier things like we were gonna discuss on the 9th with the state plan, we can move to a retreat.
I think that sounds okay with me. Okay.
Do you have a date in mind for the retreat?
I wanna pull you all, if you prefer a weekend or a weekday. We will need, we've done 5 hours in the past.
5 hours.
So I know there was some discussion about maybe the potential for it being longer this time. I know it's tough that, I think, everyone's time is valuable, but I know there was also the concern about, having things, have been too limited in terms of time from last time. What is our general feeling on 5 hours?
I think if there's a lunch break or whatever, that's okay.
Okay. I'm satisfied with that too. I think that that's a fair commitment to ask.
Hopefully on the weekend.
Yeah, that,
Okay,
Saturday.
we're wanting to do weekend?
Weekends are easy for me.
Okay,
Yeah.
that work for you?
we'll have to.
Okay, okay. So in that case, we can move that to one of the weekends, probably in July. And so Jonathan, you can send out sort of a poll for which weekends work or which weekend days work.
Yeah.
Board members, please follow up with that in a timely manner so that we can get it scheduled. And then when it comes to the regular meeting, are we thinking we still want to move that? Or was your intention that you would just keep it on the 9th, Jonathan?
No, I guess you could do either one. I was suggesting if the meetings was pretty heavy, we can move the heavy stuff, not have the meeting, and then have the retreat, and the 23rd be our 2 meetings of July.
Oh, I see,
But-
okay.
That's what I was suggesting, but if we could still do a lighter meeting on the 9th as well.
A light meeting on the 9th would be good if we needed to do any budget adjustments. Because
Okay.
we know what even if we had a meeting and just did those, that would be.
Okay. I'm fine with that. Again, I won't be able to attend, so you'll be chairing the meeting
Oh, good.
if we do that, yeah. Just wanted to throw that
A
out.
little help from my friends.
Yes, yes. Okay, yeah, if I can work with Jonathan to make sure that that meeting is light, and Jonathan, we don't have any scheduled speakers at that meeting as of now, do we?
No, that meeting is actually right now pretty light, just because we don't know what's going on with the community center. So we haven't, we're not ready yet with community center agreement. So we can definitely make that one just budget adjustments and done, and maybe one other thing.
Okay, all right, well, that works for me then. We won't make any changes to the date, and we will schedule a retreat. Okay, with that, I believe that we have gone through the entirety of our agenda. Does anyone have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion made by Hedges, seconded by Geis. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 6-0 with one absent. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, John.